So I did a little video a few months back, maybe at this point, kind of explaining how I had a Tubescreamer basically on my board for a long time because I had the Keeley Tone workstation, and on that it has the Keeley Red Dirt. Anytime I was using that live, I would kick on the Tubescreamer and then kick it back off, and I was kind of like, what am I using this thing for? The Tubescreamer, I think, is a really specific tool that does some things really well and some other things not so well at all. So if you're not a Tubescreamer fan, and this is not a pedal for you, so Tom Bukovac, Rhett Scholl, I'm looking at you guys, you're not watching, but if you were, this one would not be for you because this is Browne's Gritador. Now, you know of Browne Amplification for at least one or two of their other pedals. Probably the Protein might be what you've heard of, which is a Nobel's ODR1, which actually Tom Bukovac specifically uses instead of a Tubescreamer, and that's kind of like an improved Tubescreamer as well. And then the other side of that is a Blues Breaker, which again is a great shout if you're looking for something that's a bit more of a transparent boost without the massive mid hump of a Tubescreamer. So anyway, so what does this thing do? That's what this video is going to be about. This is a sponsored video, obviously, and they've sent me this pedal. However, all of this stuff is really going to apply to a normal Tubescreamer to most of the extent as well, because this is kind of Dave's favourite Tubescreamer, and the Tubescreamer is his favourite pedal in general. He's made a couple of tweaks. One of the things that they say is like it's slightly less nasal than your stock Tubescreamer might be, and the other thing is that there's slightly less bass roll-off, which is another thing that a Tubescreamer does. So let's listen to it, and then we'll talk about it a bit. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands. I just wanted to interrupt this to tell you that TrueFire are actually running their best offer that they ever do on the All Access membership at the moment. So use the link in the description. You can get their All Access pass for just $99 a year. Access to all the TrueFire stuff for $99 a year. I think that's actually fantastic value, even though they are paying me to say that. So like in the introduction there, I don't know, for some people that's probably not their ideal tone. For me though, what I think of the Tubescreamer as is actually like a little bit of a Dumble in a box type thing, and I think there is a huge part of the Dumble in a box pedal craze that actually is super Tubescreamer derivative. And the Dumble ODS tone in general comes from this idea that Dumble was in a room watching Robben Ford play with a bassman and a Tubescreamer, heard that sound, and apparently that's what inspired the ODS in general. So that for me is kind of what I think of as my kind of Tubescreamer tone and what you might use it for. Some things to know about a Tubescreamer. Now, of course, you probably know that there's like a very pronounced mid boost with a Tubescreamer. If you want to see that in EQ form, it's kind of stark and surprising. There's kind of some generalized stuff if you Google this about like what their EQ curve of a Tubescreamer can be. Essentially around sort of 720 hertz, somewhere like that, you get a big mid hump, and you get a bit of bass roll off and a bit of high end roll off, essentially. So that what it's really doing is helping you to get heard. Like that's the EQ profile of a Tubescreamer in general, and you can sort of move the mid hump around a little bit, but the mid hump will still be there essentially with that tone knob. The other thing it does, and I think this is why it pairs quite nicely with a Fender clean amp. So if you think about an amplifier that has loads of headroom, and I guess what we mean by that is that anything like if you put a drive pedal in front of it, it'll give you a massive volume boost, or you know, if you're playing it, it might have like a bit of a stiff feel if you're not playing it super loud. What a Tubescreamer can do, and I think this is more about how Stevie Ray Vaughan would use it, is to kind of bring that headroom down a little bit, because the Tubescreamer actually has quite a squishy response to it, quite a compressed feel to it in general. And so that's one other aspect of what a Tubescreamer can do. It can be like a cleanish boost, but it's actually not that clean, and it has quite a compressed feel, and also definitely not like a transparent boost, like it's definitely a mid boost. Those are some things that I think the Tubescreamer works really well for. And instead of like a rhythm pedal, for me, because I'm already playing amps like maybe something a Voxy type amp, or something like a Fender Blackface style amp, or if I'm using a modeler, I'm using something with quite a lot of mids. It doesn't work for me in the context where I play in bands as like a rhythm tone, is what I've found. So if you're wanting it to sit in a mix kind of as a rhythm guitar, you might want to try dropping your mid slightly, is I guess what you might want to do. But what it does work exceptionally well for is lead guitar playing, and I guess that's why it's kind of been the most important pedal in blues. Maybe might be a thing like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Gary Moore, folks like this, Robben Ford. You know, a Zen Drive is essentially a modded Tubescreamer to a lot of, and in terms of tone as well, certainly. Think of it maybe as like a lead pedal, and I think you might get way further with it, because it actually does have like a super great profile with certain amplifiers for getting you heard and getting that kind of smoother singing sort of tone, because you've got that element of not just compression, but also that element of the EQ that's going to get you heard, you know, like those important mid-range frequencies where you get pushed above the mix. I think that's a reason to love the Tubescreamer, and in particular for me, once I stopped trying to use it as something that stacks with other pedals or, you know, that sort of stuff, and kind of to see it as its own pedal that actually has a really distinct flavour and a really distinct sort of tone to it, and use it by itself for like a lead, I think you actually, for me, it does exactly what I need from it. And I've tried other pedals, I've tried, you know, various pedals, things like the Marshall Governor work really well for that rhythm tone, and can stack quite nicely with the Tubescreamer as well. But kind of thinking about the Tubescreamer as its own thing, as its own sort of lead channel of an amp, I think works quite nicely for me. You can even, I tried this, stack a couple of Tubescreamers together, and it's kind of just like more and more, or try a boost into a Tubescreamer. So for my ideal lead tone, what I might even consider doing would be in a switcher, in a loop switcher, you might have like a Tubescreamer variant, whether it's the Gritador, Portuguese for Screamer, or you know, any other tube screamer, you know, ones that might work best for you. Put a boost in front of the tube screamer. As I said, it's kind of got this nice headroom element to it, or lack of headroom, where it kind of compresses. So if you put a boost in front of it, it kind of just gives you more of what's going on there, and that really kind of singing thing can become more apparent. I think this is a great sounding pedal. It's got a lovely response to it. As I say, if you're looking for a tube screamer that has a little bit more bass to it and a little bit less of the nasal quality, that's what they say it does. To me, it sounds like a tube screamer, which is exactly what I would want from one of these. It's not the craziest expensive one pedal ever. I think about 179 Andertons at the moment, I think, is the price. But yeah, that's why I love the tube screamer in general, and this is no exception. Let me know your favourite tube screamer variants in the comments, and shout out to Browne Amplification. All three of their pedals that I've tried, I've really enjoyed. I've got the Carbon X on my board at the moment. I'm going to try switching the Protein out for that, but a really cool company, some cool pedals. Of course, you know, you've tried a tube screamer before. This is another tube screamer if you're looking for one. Maybe you're not. Cheers for stopping by.